Crossgar in early 1951, just a rural village in County Down, Northern Ireland, was a village with a rich evangelical heritage. George Gibson, known by the name Hallelujah George, was a close friend of W.P. Nicholson and known for his evangelistic zeal.
The mission hall and Crossgar was locally known as George Gibson's Hall. He was a cattle dealer and he had the mission hall, and then after he died, then the mission was still went on, meetings on every Sunday night, and then of course when the Free Church was formed, to use that first, and must say it was well attended.
In 1950, the committee members of the mission hall decided to have a gospel mission. This was to take place early in 1951. The evangelist was to be a young Reverend Ian Paisley.
Yes, as far as I can mind, it was Charles Clean told him about this evangelist, and some of the elders, suppose, out of the church, I think, went to hear him preaching, and then they invited him to come for a mission.
It was actually the ones that were actually involved then. I would say George Gibson was the main man, and probably Cecil Harvey. They were involved in asking Mr. Paisley to come out to conduct a mission.
But the committee felt the mission hall would be too small and decided to ask for the use of Lasara Presbyterian Church Hall. The members of the mission hall believed it would only be a formality to get Lasara Church Hall because many of the members of that committee were elders in Lasara, and the Lasara session had no problem in granting their church hall for the mission.
I was very busy, and it was going to be tough to fulfill this engagement. And two, I thought that perhaps maybe I wasn't just the man to go there at that particular time. How far wrong I was. But they went away and prayed, and they came back and said, no, we don't care about what you say. We have been constrained of God to get you to Crossgar, and we want you to come. Well, I prayed about it, and I said, well, I got the same leaning that I had to go to Crossgar, so to Crossgar I went. Now, the officers of that mission hall were also elders in the Lasara Presbyterian Church. So they came to me and said, this hall is going to be too small. Well, I said, I'm not interested in that, because I said I'd rather have a small hall packed than be in a large building and not have the blessing. But I said, it's your business, and I will go where the hall you provide. Of course, I said, there'll be no shackles put on me. I'll just preach what I have. Well, they said, we know that, but we could get the Presbyterian Church Hall. Well, I say, we get it, that is your business. So, of course, they being the session, they met, and it was unanimous.
However, there had been a lot of discontent in Lasara. The congregation had already been divided over the calling of a new minister. It was a time when many evangelicals were discontent with the liberal and anti-gospel drift of the Presbyterian Church.
Well, there was a lot of dissatisfaction there with the voting, and they had a voting, and the Reverend Chart was the main man, but he hadn't enough of a majority to get into the church. And then they put the other person up, and he didn't get voted enough to go either. And because of that, really, that's when the dissatisfaction was arising. And they changed the voting. The voting list got changed a bit after that. But there was basically the church there was a majority of evangelicals in the Sarda. And then there was a minority, probably would have been about 2 to 1 in the numbers, and they weren't too keen on the evangelicals, and this is why they were determined that they weren't going to let the Reverend Chart in.
Then, at a meeting on January the 8th, Down Presbytery decided that the planned mission should not go ahead, citing the local difficulties in the church. But the decision of the presbytery to ban the mission was not communicated to the people who continued to plan the mission. Leaflets went out advertising the mission in Lasara Hall, and there was to be a march of witness on Saturday the 3rd of February. The march of witness made its way down Killyleagh Street from the Mission Hall, led by Lasara Boys Brigade Band. It then turned into down Patrick Street and into Market Street, only to discover that the doors of the church hall had been locked against them.
I remember marching round right enough, but faint recollection as far as I think it was a lot of doors were banged and one thing or another when we're passing up by, you know.
My father heard about this mission that was starting in Lasara with Dr. Paisley. So it was a Saturday night, I think. My father decided to take us, go to that mission. It was a really wet night, and when we arrived up in the square in Crossgar, a crowd of people were gathered outside Lasara. So my father parked the car and went across to see what was happening. And they came back and said that they've been closed out of Lasara. They're not going to be allowed to have the mission.
What the people were to discover is that 90 minutes before the planned commencement of that Saturday night meeting, the presbytery had summoned Lasara's elders. They were informed there of the decision of the presbytery to defer the gospel campaign and were instructed to reverse their decision to grant the hall for the preaching of the gospel. They were brought in alphabetical order, Hugh James Adams being first.
Well, you knew my father was suspended. I mean, they were refusing the gospel, the hall for the gospel mission. And my father says, "Does that mean I'm suspended?" Yes. Good night, gentlemen. And that was it. That was him out of the Presbyterian Church. And he was a Sunday school teacher and he was an elder.
George Gibson was also suspended. But the people who'd been locked out of Lasara Church Hall had no alternative now but to go back to the Mission Hall, where they were addressed by the suspended elders.
So I was at it. We were, in fact, I suppose I marched up that night with them from Lasara, I recall, but I was a young lad of 18 or so, you know, and you didn't know what was going on, why the whole protest was on, but when we got to the Mission Hall, we knew what had happened then. It was a desperate wet night, so it was. And I attended every night then, so I attended.
In view of the high-handed nature of the presbytery, a protest was organised at the Sunday service of Lasara Presbyterian Church the next day. 30 men of Lasara's evangelical dissidents, including the suspended elders and the Reverend Ian Paisley, were there to picket.
My father was there, wasn't he?
Your father was there,
I think he was there.
Yes, there's some of the...
Charlie Clean was there.
The picket, well, I remember the picket very clearly. I remember that Sunday morning. We all trailed into the church, Lasara, and it was a minister from Ballynahinch. I can't remember his name, but he was doing the service. And of course we went in, and a lot of hallelujahs and amens, which normally you wouldn't have got in Lasara, you know.
And we went on the Sunday morning to the Lasara church, and then we come out again. They were protesting outside the church in the placard, and that was a big controversy. So it was any relations you had sort of at the town, things were hotting up. So in fact, my father, he left. He wasn't safe at the time. He left Lasara and went to the Free Church, and some of the people in the locality said to me, "Imagine a wise man like Willie here, leaving the Presbyterian Church to go to that church there." And then he got saved later on.
After we'd done the picket, there was a meeting held at Hugh James Adams' house, and that was the decision was made there to form the Free Church, and we weren't taken into account. It was only those of the session of Lasara that were actually involved and actually setting up the Free Church. As I say, it was Hugh James Adams, William Campbell, James Morrison, Cecil Harvey, George Gibson. They were the main sort of thing. They were the evangelicals in it.
That evening, the 4th of February, the mission that had been planned commenced properly. It was to be a mighty time of blessing.
It was packed out too, completely packed, because it was in the hall. They had to get chairs and
half the people know whether they're ordained or not. You know, there's a lot of people professed, and I don't know now what happened to them all, you know. But a lot of people even out of the town at that time, because they never heard the like of it. They wouldn't have heard that sort of preaching, you know.
I do mind the mission, huh? Because I was there every night, and there was a lot of people got saved at that mission. There was over 90 people saved at that mission. One's around the district.
Yes, it was a really good mission. There was crowds. The hall was packed every night.
I was at the age of 10, and I was attending the mission in Crossgar, and Mr. Paisley was a preacher in that mission, and he was preaching on the second coming of the Lord. And I was only 10, but I realised that night if I died without Christ, I wouldn't be in heaven. And I went behind that night, and the late George K. Gibson led me to the Lord that night. And the hardest man in Crossgar was in that mission.
But one of the things that stood out for the people were the times of prayer.
There was a lot of prayer meetings and all-night prayer meetings for men that went to them.
There was prayer meetings went on all night at that time. And my brother George and some of the older men, they've been there all night. There was some all-night prayer meetings. George Hutton and George Gibson and a few others, Cecil Harvey. That would have been George Leggett and myself would have been all-night prayer meetings on it.
But soon the mission came to an end. 94 people had professed faith in Christ, but the people had to face what they were going to do. Would they go back to the church which had tried to ban the gospel, or would they do something else? After much prayer, it was decided that the Free Presbyterian Church should be formed. The church was constituted on the 17th of March, 1951. But those early pioneers had to face the wrath of the community, and it was not an easy stand to take.
I found it hard leaving Kilmore, where I sang in the choir. And I didn't know it at the time, but afterwards, George told me he was praying I would get out of the choir.
Well, there was tension. As a matter of fact, there was people who hardly had spoken to you.
Very hard, it was, and very hard. I was at school at the time, and it was very, very tough. Even teachers. Very tough. It was.
Poor Hugh James, he paid for a lot of the customers left him. But the funny thing was a lot of the Catholics come in. There's no sting with the Free Church now, but then you were looked down on. There were hard times, but yet the people were united.
There were many in 1951 who said that the church would not last.
The people said it wouldn't be. No, it would see a year, they said.
I think the people who come out, they were really united. And were prepared to take the being despised and all the rest of it. Crossgar has stood the test.